Welcome to the Pep Talk, everyone. And today I have a special guest with us, Ebonee Shaw. Eb, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself.
My name is Ebonee Shaw. I am in St. Louis, where Stephanie was and left me. Currently, I'm the development director for the Walker Scottish Rite Clinic and the Kids Rock Cancer Program at Maryville University, which is on the outskirts of St. Louis in the suburbs. I do fundraising. I've always done fundraising, and it's probably what I'm always going to do. I'm 17 years in on this, and I just love helping and bringing resources to the community to people who normally either don't know where to find them or don't know how to get help. So that's what I do.
I lived in St. Louis. Ebonee was working at the St. Louis Crisis Nursery, and I couldn't work there at first because I didn't have any paperwork. And so I went to volunteer for her, and I think we both knew that there was a connection and I needed to be hired and I needed to work for her. Ebonee taught me a lot of really important lessons, that it's not sometimes all about what you know, it's also about who you know. It's about bringing all those resources together. It's about honestly making a lot out of very little sometimes. Holy moly, all I'm going to say are Subway sandwiches, Eb, and you should know. And I don't know how to explain this. In my life, in that time, sometimes living in Missouri was really lonely. Because of the very segregated communities and maybe some of the smaller towns and how I felt there. And Ebonee felt like home. Her family felt like home. It was warmth. There was a lot of cultural justness to her family. Just the way she, always, I was her little señorita, her mamacita. There was a lot of names. And you always embraced me from the get-go.
I was thinking back this morning about when I first met you, and what I remember is that you emailed me, and it was this long paragraph with no breaks.
Me?
About how you lived here now, and you had gotten married, but you couldn't work, and you wanted to give back, and you didn't know what to do, and blah, blah, blah. And I showed it to Diane, and Diane was like, we give everybody a chance. And I called you, and then, I don't know, the magic happened.
The magic did happen, though. One day, we've always joked we're going to join forces and we're going to start a huge, something big, something magical. So today, though, the reason I wanted to bring in Eb was because right now with Canada, we feel like we kind of got it all together. And I don't agree. I think we have a lot of work to do with our own issues of equality and diversity and human rights, especially with reconciliation and appreciating our Indigenous culture. But having said that, I do feel like we're really closely aligned with the civil movement, and there's been a lot of those civil movements here in Canada in support of what's been going on in the US. And I do not have the voice for it, and I really wanted to bring someone who I love and respect to be able just to come in and share, what is Black Lives Matter? What does it mean to people? How did you grow up? So that is, thank you so much for being here and just shedding some light.
Sure.
I will start like this, Eb. Growing up, what did that look like for you that maybe people don't quite understand?
So growing up in St. Louis?
Yes.
So I live in North St. Louis County. It's a suburb of the city of St. Louis. And I grew up in Berkeley, Missouri, which is where I live now still. I live in the house that I grew up in, but I did all of my young things. So I went to school, we went to aftercare, some of us went to church in a town called Kinloch, Missouri, which is now, there's not a lot there. But these are African-American communities. And growing up, all my friends lived here. We went to church here, we did everything here. So my bubble did not expand probably until I went to high school. And so it wasn't until then that I realized how segregated St. Louis was and how different it is. And so right now, Tim, my son Tim, he's 15 and he's in private school out in West St. Louis County. And just driving around those neighborhoods, sometimes we drive around and just look at the homes because I just want him to dream bigger. The things I never did. I didn't even know that things existed. I didn't know that there were houses with 6-car garages until I was an adult. I didn't know that was a thing. And where do the people in St. Louis that have this kind of money, where do they come from? Because these neighborhoods are huge. Is it new money? Is it old money? It's probably a significant mix of both.
Yeah.
But the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County are very, very, very segregated. And I think it's becoming a lot better. And I think you just get comfortable moving in and out of those different communities, but you also know where not to go, because there are places that me as a person, like we were just talking about Washington, Missouri, there is no way in the world I would be caught out there after dark. Just some communities that you just kind of know to stay away from.
Yeah, which is sad. And it's interesting because when I talked to Ryan about it, my husband who grew up in a small town, his awareness of that is like, what? No. And to me, like, don't be ridiculous, Steph. Like I've said, I'm not stopping for a cop. I'll call 911. I will drive to the next gas station. We'll figure it out there. And he's like, you will not be doing that. I'm like, just try me. Like, right? Like but there's a lot of, whether you call it ignorance, being naive, whatever it is, that's a real thing. And I remember the day that you came in and told me once something about that you had a sweater in your back seat. I don't know if you remember that you said like that there was some of your friends or you who had a university sweater in your back seat. So if you were ever caught like in a place that you weren't sure of things, you could always like look like you were an educated person, look like you were, which if anyone knows that, like she is like successful, educated, like all these things, but it doesn't change your appearance. And so it was like your way of proving that. And it made me so sad and so mad at the same time that you felt like you had to do that.
Yeah, there was also a point where me and Tim, we drove. So my first car that I ever purchased was a red Dodge Charger. Like I had to have it. But we got the windows tinted, not super dark, because I know better than that, because that just makes you a target. But I would always, at certain times and in certain neighborhoods, we would ride around with the windows down so I could make sure that people knew that it was a female and a baby in the car, so that we weren't threatening for some, and then in certain neighborhoods that please don't rob us.
Which is like, it's like, those are the hard truths. Like, these are the things I feel like when you would share, I would go home and be like, this isn't, like, this is not okay. But to your point, the way you said, like, you grew up in a bubble, all these other people of like opposite race were growing up in their own bubble, thinking none of this was really going on. None of this is just happening. Yeah. I used to always make a comment to Ryan, like the only time you guys are ever cheering on or like becoming familiar with the city or cheering on the opposite races are when you're cheering for sports. It's like, I would always feel like people were screaming to like, you know, Hispanic people to go home until they went to a St. Louis Cardinals game and then they're cheering them on.
I remember my first experience with racism, but I didn't know what it was. I was young, like third grade maybe. And both of my parents are from Mississippi. And we would spend a lot of time down there, summers, all kinds of stuff. So we were visiting my grandmother and we were at this department store, like looking for clothes. So it was right before school was starting. And it was this skirt on like a model. And I was trying to figure out what size it was. And I was looking under the skirt and doing all kinds of stuff. And this little white girl walked up to me and called me a name. And I was like, what is that? And I had to ask my mama.
Oh my gosh.
But that was also, I also attribute some of that to like the southern region at the time, because this had to be, if I was 8 or so, the early 80s. And things are just different down there. Mm-hmm. I guess things are different everywhere. But then as you get older, you see those same situations, but they play out differently. They're more professional about it. Mm-hmm. Like they railroad people out of things. I've been in positions where, and I think you know this too, like been in positions where someone thinks that their child or their grandchild can do your job better than you with no experience and no degree. And you just have to kind of fight your way through those things. You got to be super humble, but super woke at the same time so you can understand what's happening. And then there are some people that can deal with those things very well. I think I have a lot of patience. I have the patience of Job. And then there are some people who can't, who need to bring things to the forefront. And I think that's good. And I think you see that in the movements and in the protests, right? So in all these protests that were happening all over the country, all the time for the past, lifetime, they were protesting in the 60s for civil rights movements. And it hasn't stopped. It just continues to move on. But what has changed is the people that are a part of the movement. So The millennials now,
has that changed? Like what has sparked a bit of a difference with this recent, like last 6-8 months or so?
I think, and I think it's more than 6 to 8 months. If I go back to when Michael Brown was killed, I think that was 2014. I just think that the way of the world is different. So when Martin Luther King and them were marching, everybody was calm and peaceful to a point. They don't get to the part where, not often, they don't glorify the part where the tide started to shift and things started to change. And that was around the time Dr. King was assassinated. So now you move forward like 40 years. And these people these young folks now, they're not the same folks. They're not having it and they're not taking it anymore. And thank God for them. So when you see a protest and you see things happening, there's a lot sometimes like disruption within them. I don't necessarily think that those are the people that are out there for the right reasons, but I think it's just people that's coming to antagonize. But for those protesters that are out there to really bring light to the cause, thank God for them, because if they had stopped, then things wouldn't be the same. Things will continue in the manner in which they are, which is not okay.
Yeah.
So I think it takes all kinds of people to move the movement along. So there are some people that go out there and protest all the time. I've done it a couple times, but I'm not one of the regulars. There are people that do that every single day. And thank God for them, because that's one level of it. So once you protest, the next part of it is you have to have people that are listening to you, that are in positions to make change. So if you need a law changed, you protest, you bring light to that change. Then you have to have somebody on the other side that can vote your change through.
Yeah.
So that's the next level of it. So, and I think we'll start to see, I've started to see here more African Americans and people of color running for political positions and public appointed positions, because that's where the change happens. So you need the protesters, you need to bring light to issues, and then you need people that can carry your change through.
What are like the next steps? Like what, in your perspective, do people need to keep doing? Like I'm married to like the quietest guy. We both kind of have two quiet Tims in our life, right? But we were saying how there is like a role for everyone. Not everyone's maybe on Facebook or doing interviews like this, but there is a role for everyone, and they can all play their small role. In your perspective, what does that look like? How would you best see people's efforts being put forward?
So for some, so we talked about the people that are protesting, that's good. And the people that are showing up to meetings and bringing light to the situation, need those people, gotta have them. The second part would be what we just said, running for positions, just being in positions of power to kind of help move that through. So what I think other people can do that are non-minorities, I think one thing you can do is help push those folks through that are running for those offices. That when you hear policies and laws and changes, things that just need to change that come through the pipeline, supporting those in whatever way that you can. So for some people, that may be a monetary gift. It may be what we talked about earlier. You can't do nothing if you don't know people. That's very important for every aspect of your life. When you're networking, you have to know people. So maybe I don't know who I need to know. And a lot of the times I don't, but I always know somebody that knows somebody. Or I go there.
She really does. She really does.
If I don't, I'm going to find them. And if I don't know somebody that knows somebody, I know somebody that's next to the person. So I use that argument all the time. You might not be the person, but you the man next to the man. And I know you can help me figure out what those things are. So sometimes it's just carrying people through, giving them a resource that they don't have. The other thing I think people can do that's most important and maybe not as visible, because everybody doesn't want to be visible in their fight. Two things. One is vote. And I know people keep hearing that, and I know everybody is tired of hearing that, but it's so true. We have major elections coming up here in November, major elections. And if we want another 4 years of what has just happened, from everything from, the trying to ship kids, having those kids in those detention centers at the border, building walls to leave people out, intentionally segregating people more so than we already are, just the whole coronavirus thing. Like, if we want a whole nother 4 years of ignorance, we can just not vote. But, you know, in order to turn the vote, it's going to take African Americans voting and women, because those are the two parties that shift the tide at all times. So those three things. And then the last one is, which is more simple, and I think people can do this all the time. It's just when you see something that's out of line, say something about it. You know, we all, I think, get into circles, our own circles even. We hear things that people say that they believe that you know is not true.
Yeah.
Whatever the topic is. Yeah. If you know that it's not true, it's okay to guide someone in a different direction. And I think that's really the easiest thing to do. Because we talked earlier about bubbles, and when you grow up in your bubble, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And I don't think you can hold that against people all the time. But the older you get, it's important for you yourself to start learning things that you need to know. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think
once you do know, that's, oh my gosh, what you should just run. I'm just saying. But once you do know, and that's where I think, I know I've gotten in struggles with my own person here, but like, once I know that you know, now your silence is condoning. And yep. I think that's what's so hard. People think that silence is just like it's, oh no, I didn't say it was okay. I'm just keeping things okay. Like, we're just not mixing the pot, stirring the pot. Your silence is a condone. Your silence is a slap in my face. Your silence is a slap to all these people, to, you know, for my family, for your nephews, for your brother-in-law, for our friends. The silence speaks so much louder.
I think sometimes, you know, when you grow up, you're just around who you're around. And that's not a bad thing. But if you grow up one way and then your life starts to integrate later, then you start to know people of all different backgrounds and races. And even if that comes through like teammates, so I see that a lot, even working on a college campus, you know, we recruit from everywhere. And if you get a kid from the middle of Missouri, it is quite possible that person went through all 18 years of their life without interacting with one person of color. You know, that's super possible. And not that maybe their families thought one way, but it's just maybe the people that they were around, you know, I don't know. But once you start to integrate and know different people, and it's like, oh, this is not bad, or I have
So I'm curious about your perspective, because I've gone back and forth with some people about us not seeing color, children not seeing color. Not true. So that's the way I deal with my kids, and lots of people probably disagree with me, and they're like, Steph, kids don't see that. My kids see all the shades of color in our family. There's like, we compare them all to like food and different things, and like Lito, which is my dad, is like cinnamon, and like mommy is like, and Uncle Jeff is like chocolate. And what's interesting though is they kind of love talking about all the different people in their family and all the different colors, and find it almost something they're really proud of. And so I always want to ask people, like, what's your take on that? Is it okay to say that you see color? Is it okay to say that we're all kind of colorful? Or is that going away from really the point that people shouldn't see color?
When people say that they don't see color, I just don't believe that. Because what, are you blind? So you definitely see colors. Maybe what you're saying is that I treat everybody the same, which is a better statement. Mm-hmm. But I remember one time I asked my godson, who's just started his freshman year in college, but he was probably maybe like second grade or something. And it was this girl he liked in his class. And I was trying to get him to tell me whether she was white or black. He was like, I don't know. She's light brown. She was white. And that was at that point, I was like, these kids probably really don't see colors. Mm-hmm. It's not until the world starts to taint you mm-hmm. that you see one way or the other. But yeah. I remember that vividly. Josiah.
And what's interesting with the way you just said it, though, and that was really different growing up with me. It was never white and black. It was never, and my brother-in-law has come to Canada before, and he's been like, "We're all black people." I said, "Well, in Canada, it's like, well, there's the someone who was maybe like identifies like as Ukrainian, and they just came from the Philippines maybe 10 years ago, and they're from Vietnam, and they're from so it's like Russia, and you kind of go along and they're like, and there's an African American, but you like, there's so many that in my mind growing up, it would have been so hard to tell like who were the minorities kind of and who weren't. And then when I went to the US, I all of a sudden got put like in this category. I don't know. I was like, what just happened? There's a category out here, and it was very like white, black, white. Like in St. Louis, I really feel like it's white and black. In other parts of like in Arizona, I think it was like just white and not white.
At the end of the day, we're all human, right? We all have like the same capabilities to be successful, the same want to live and thrive and all those different things. So I think it's just spreading the word that people are all the same and people can live together. I don't know. That's what I would say.
I think that that's great. And I hope to keep also just allowing people to know that it's a real thing. It's actually something real that has been going on. That was my bigger struggle whenever I'd go to some of the small towns in Missouri with that lack of, that's not really happening. And I'd have you messaging me at the same time of how you were feeling. And like, so it was just, again, creating that awareness. If you have a voice to speak, even in a smaller setting at someone's house,
just say it.
Shed some light. Shed like, hey, this is what so-and-so's feeling like. It is really, really hard. It's really hard, but
I think it would help. So for people that have like circles of friends that are not like them, they have a mixed up background group of friends, just kind of think about what your friend could be going through. So like Black Lives Matter may not affect me personally, right? But it affects my coworker that I sit next to every day. And then kind of think of how all those things go together and kind of how scary it is at the same time. Because I'm not lying to you, I think about Tim. So you've known Tim forever. I don't know, since he was little, before he was in school. And now he's 15, he'll be 16 in 2 months. He's a sophomore in high school. So in 2 years, the world will consider him an adult, right? So I know that Tim is harmless, but I think there could be situations where people come upon him and they don't know him, and they treat him like they treat these people like animals in the street. And I don't ever want that to happen to him. But we also can't allow him to live in a bubble to pretend like those things don't happen, because he has to be aware of the world that's around him. He has to be aware of the company that he keeps. So he and we talk about that. Because he's in private school, and some of the kids that are in school with him, every kid I've met has been nice, but there could be some places where he's out with a kid from a different neighborhood, different background, and they feel free to talk to authorities, in a certain kind of way, and he cannot be a part of that. He cannot be a part of that, because at the end of the day, Tim's only job is to come home, and his job is to do that however he has to. So if that means sucking up your pride, being extremely humble, I think he's smart enough, because he was raised by me, to know how to, and my mama, to know how to do those things and be able to come home. There are some people that fight back, and they don't always end up good. So we won't be the statistic.
Can I ask you a question? So Caleb has a bit of a stutter.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about you the other day when we were chatting about this, and that alone, the fear that you might carry with Tim getting stopped by a cop, and because Tim had a little bit of a stutter at one point, correct? Because I was going to call you.
Yeah, he still does.
He still does. And I'm thinking, the fear that both of us bring forward, mine is nothing. I'm not worried about him having a stutter, getting stopped by the cops, and not being able to get his words out. Where right now I'm just getting all tingly because I don't want to start crying, but like that fear shouldn't exist for you, for him to get stopped by the cops, and because he has a stutter and they don't understand that puts him in a position, something that I would never even worry about with Caleb.
Mm-hmm. I've worried about that before, because he's at the age where he can control it, but sometimes he has to stop, pause, think, and so the answer isn't quick, which is what some people might be looking for. Sometimes, most of the time it is, but sometimes you never know. I get caught up sometimes when I don't know what I'm trying to say. or what I need to say, or if I don't know the answer.
Well, does anyone really know how to do the alphabet backwards? I mean, hopefully that.
So you get nervous because you don't want, dang, you just want people to see your children the way that you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you make that possible. So you just
by loving people, by me knowing you. This is what I wish everyone would do, is just meet like one person and truly learn about them. Until you fall in love with someone, until you learn about them, I don't think someone's heart can really change sometimes. I don't think till it now becomes your family, your best friend, your person, that it
yeah. Yep. And I think that applies to this whole coronavirus thing as well. Like, I think people don't think that it's real disease or virus or whatever is going on. Mm-hmm. People don't think it's real until it impacts somebody that's close to them.
Yeah.
I know 3 people that died in the last month from it. So, and I just think that those worlds, you know, they just become totally different. And I think that it comes when you talk about all kinds of things, when you talk about violence in communities. I remember when I was at the crisis nursery, a girl that was there, I was saying I was going to a funeral or something. And she's like, I've never been to a funeral before. And she was like mid-20s. And I was thinking, you never in your life been to a funeral, like not a grandparent or anything like that? And she was like, nope. I was like, in my head, I'm like, what a blessing. Because just being a product of the community that I live in, you start seeing people disappear early on. I remember my first funeral that I went to was the summer between 8th and 9th grade. And then from then, it just kind of is what it is. So you just become, I think some people are more aware and more privy to things. And it has a lot to do with where you live, where you come up, you know, the situation that surrounds you. But I did want to say one thing. I saw this meme this morning, actually, as I was doing my beat for this. And it says, I'm reading, it says, "Dear white people, no one is asking you to apologize for your ancestors. We are asking you to dismantle the system of oppression that they built and that you maintain and benefit from." And it's so true. Like, I think I run into people sometimes and I think they think, and I've seen this on other interviews, like national things. They're like, well, I didn't have anything to do with slavery. And duh, we know you did not. That was so many years ago. But actually, in all actuality, it wasn't that long ago. No. If you look into different families, you know, I have a coworker who was telling me her dad is in his 80s. So his parents were born in like the 1800s. You know, slavery didn't end until 1864, so it's really not that far removed. And if you look at the way that some people grow up, she's lucky not to have grown up like this, but those kinds of things, trauma stays with you, and you pass it down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And so some people just don't know how to get out of that cycle.
And just because slavery ended, and I've had this argument, doesn't mean racism ended.
So no, you didn't have anything to do with slavery. We know that, you know, but there were systems that were built around that, and they still exist, and you benefit from it whether you understand it or not.
I think that's more the apology that I want to give all the time, is like, I feel like I'm sorry because I just didn't even understand and that's the whole check your privilege. I didn't understand all the privileges I was getting. And I thought that those should just be for everyone. But in some aspect, I was supporting a system that wasn't giving all those privileges. That wasn't just keeping people safe, not even just privileges, just mattering, right? The Black Lives Matter, it's just to matter. It's not even being like equal, like it is just saying we want to matter. We want to be we want to mean the same much. Our kids should mean the same as another kid. Right. But I feel like that's where my apology comes from, that it's just, I feel really dumb and I should have been doing more, and I feel like I should be doing more. So.
Well, I think it all goes back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, people being in the right positions. Mm-hmm. You just got to be in a position to help other people out. And damn it, when you get there, you have to reach back and pull somebody up with you. You just have to, like, that's the only way that it's going to work. I remember one time, so my name is Ebonee, my sister's name is Mahogany. And if I submit a resume somewhere, you know what I am before I come through the door. So when I named him, he's named after his dad, but that was easy to choose because I always wanted a name where people wouldn't be able to judge him before they saw him. So when he comes through, he gets at least gets a chance to come through and win off his own merit. Now, I love my name, and my sister adores her name. So there's nothing bad to say about that, but I just wanted him to, like, you know, have that opportunity and that chance.
Mm-hmm. That's something that my sister and her brother-in-law did. And of course, I was always trying to find something super, super Spanish for my kids. It's so funny that it's not just even seeing past someone's skin, it's seeing past someone's name. And and I remember you telling me that back in the day. You're like, oh, Tim's name is Tim for a reason. Like, he's gonna get every chance that I can give him. So yeah.
I've always loved your family, like your family dynamic. And I think I used to try to call us, your family's like a rainbow. You know, y'all all over the place.
We are all over.
But y'all so close. But I think it's so good for like Braden and Caleb and Hannah and Devin. Is that your nephew?
Devin and Derek, yeah.
Devin and Derek. See, just the fact that they get to grow up amongst one another, and you all are super loving and very close. I remember one time you told me if they weren't going to be anything, they were going to be good huggers.
Yeah.
And
really putting a strain on my goal.
That, and just the fact that they've grown up with such a mix among them, I think will help them as adults, you know, to be able to intermingle with everybody, to see people as the same, and to just be nice humans. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? They'll just be nice human beings. Mm-hmm. That's all you really want.
Eb, through all of this, who has been like your biggest inspiration?
It would probably be my parents. Because my mom has always been involved in the community, long as I can remember. She was always an elected official of some sort. And she's also the person that told me that you can go, it's more than one way to look at a challenge. So you can go around things, you can strategize to get to where you want to be. She was a councilwoman in the ward that we live in the city and municipality that we're in. Mm-hmm. And she ran for like assistant mayor, but I don't think I can't remember if she ever got it or not. But so every city in the United States belongs to the National League of Cities. So every little small municipality, St. Louis County, even the bigger cities, LA, everybody belongs to that. And she went and got on the board of directors for the National League of Cities. So instead of being like in control of just this little small area we're in, now she gets to vote on policies and rules that affect the whole country. Mm. So a big part of that lesson was just learning that she used to always say that it's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So it's more than one way to get to where you're trying to be. And then my dad, you know, he's so quiet but has something to say all the time. Like when he says it, it's said, and that's it. We're not arguing about it. We're not having long conversations about it. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. And he was the high school principal out here in this area for a long time, forever. He started there in 86. He retired in like 08 or 09. And when I'm out and about, there are people that know me just because they know my dad, you know, and my parents had that kind of influence on somebody else's life. So it's like, it's hard to follow in those footsteps sometimes, but just to think that if you want things to be better, you just got to do more. Mm-hmm. And a big lesson around that is just not learning how to not be discouraged, to be humble. That's a big part of it. And that's a hard part, to be humble and to be patient. So all things come eventually.
I love that. Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much we probably could do this for another 3 hours. But thank you so much for your time. I love you to pieces. You have been such a huge impact on my life. Your parents have been. I've had sleepovers at Ebonee's parents' house.
You're like the one friend that's not like a part of the friends I grew up with, that they don't question who it is. They're like, how's Stephanie? Even Tim, You saw he got on here earlier. He don't do that to other people.
He is such a good kid. He's such a good guy. He's not even a kid anymore. But no, I love you guys. You have my eternal love, and I am rooting for this movement to keep going forward. And I hope I can just keep bringing your voice to people. And I hope that people share this video. I might have to split this up a bit because it was long, but I hope they keep passing it forward and sharing it, because that, I think, is such a huge part of this whole movement, is creating that awareness. So thank you, Eb, for sharing your voice with everyone.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Bye.